381. When we had George Allen, he got disconnected. He will be back. This is the beginning of the Levin surge in various states, in some congressional districts, where I've said from day one, as we've participated in the primary processes, we have to elect as many conservatives as possible because nothing's going to get done if we don't. And if Romney's elected president, we don't have a Republican Senate with a whole bunch of new conservatives there, we're going to have a big problem. Senator, Governor George Allen, how are you, my friend?
I am doing great, Mark. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. Now, where are you right now?
I'm in Northern Virginia. Susan and I actually had a moment to watch our daughter play field hockey, and she scored a goal when they won her game, and so at any rate, I'm actually at home today, and then tomorrow in Loudoun County, and then down to Southwest Virginia for a few days, and campaigning with folks throughout Virginia. I'm not going to the convention. I figure every Republican that is in Tampa is already for me, and so I want to be with folks we can persuade to be on our side.
All right, let me ask you a couple of questions. Now, I notice Tim Kaine is running commercials where he's trying to run to the right of you on fiscal matters. Didn't he leave the state in shambles in terms of the debt?
Yeah, he did. He spent his last year as governor in a very partisan political position of chairman of the Democratic National Committee, handpicked by President Obama. And he was shutting down rest areas throughout Virginia. He's trying to stampede the General Assembly, the legislature, for a $2 billion tax increase on everyone earning as little as $17,000 a year, including seniors on fixed income. And at any rate, his tax increases in his budget were defeated uniformly by Democrats and Republicans. And Bob McDonnell came in as governor, and with the General Assembly, they balanced the budget without raising taxes and actually ended up with a little surplus. So raising taxes on people earning as little, all taxpayers that earn anything over $17,000 a year were going to be taxed, and fortunately, he was stopped in doing that. And if you want to talk about cuts, when I was governor, I cut my salary by 10% all 4 years. We reduced the number of state government employees by approximately 10%, and we cut taxes by over $600 million, and that's when the Democrats were in control of the legislature. And we worked together, and over 300,000 new jobs were created in the private sector, whereas when Tim Kaine was governor, over 100,000 Virginians lost jobs.
You know, many people, me included, view you, when you were governor, as sort of the Ronald Reagan of Virginia. You not only slashed the bureaucracy, as you talk about, you really fought the federal government in its efforts to drag down the state with its really aggressive environmental rules and so forth. I mean, and what's interesting to me is Tim Kaine won't run on his record, not only as governor, but as DNC chairman. Am I right when I say, because I remember this, he supported Obamacare, he supported the stimulus, he supported these massive programs as DNC chairman, did he not?
Yeah, he sure did, Mark. He says that several things on Obamacare. He said, number one, that, quote, it was a great achievement. He also, in his partisan role, was saying it was going to be great for Democrats. Just so your listeners know, I want to be the deciding vote to repeal Obamacare and then replace it with market-based approaches that are more personal, more affordable, and portable, such as health savings accounts, and let small businesses band together across state lines and have more competition and choice and more affordable insurance. And I also think that the states ought to be granted the flexibility to run the Medicaid program. We reformed welfare when I was governor, and the welfare rolls were reduced by 50%, which meant 50% of the folks on welfare got jobs, and which is good. And there's a dignity in having a job. It saved the taxpayers money as well, but the point is that the states ought to be given that freedom as the laboratories of innovation to operate the Medicaid program much more efficiently than having it all run out of Washington, D.C. Another disagreement with Tim Kaine, who also, by the way, you talk about the onerous regulations, he's been a supporter of that cap-and-trade energy tax scheme, which would cause skyrocketing electricity costs. It's what EPA is doing right now, and it means enormous job loss.
Well, let me ask you about that, Senator. If talking to George Allen, if this EPA continues what it's doing, not only will it hurt coal miners in and around Virginia, it'll drive up electricity prices for those of us who've never been in a coal mine. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're exactly right. All of us use electricity. The railroads would be affected by it as well. That's their number one commodity, and railroad cars are made in Roanoke, Virginia. And Virginia also has the largest coal port in the United States. But we're in Northern Virginia, in Prince William County and Loudoun County, part of their economic development efforts are to try to get data centers in. The same in Southside Virginia. But if you end up with higher electricity costs, that is a major component of operating a data center. And so if you knock coal out as a component for reliable, affordable electricity, yes, it's harming jobs and railroads, our ports, but all of us who use electricity will end up feeling that same pain, paying our monthly electric bill as we feel at the gasoline pump.
What is Tim Kaine's plan for creating more jobs and more businesses and more wealth in Virginia, other than voting with Obama constantly? I mean, I've never heard the man actually put out a plan for a pro-growth policy.
No, he says he's an unabashed supporter of the president, and he wants to do what the president wants him to do. And even what's going on now with this latest failure from Washington, which is causing this sequestration, besides these devastating, disproportionate cuts to our military readiness, there's over 200,000 good-paying jobs in Virginia at risk, and his solution is to raise taxes. And I want to be clear with your listeners, Mark. In my view, the men and women who serve in our armed forces should never be used as a political bargaining tool to raise taxes on job-creating business owners. Raising taxes doesn't create more jobs, except maybe at the IRS, but it doesn't create jobs in the private sector. And what we need is a more simple, fair, and competitive tax policy in our country rather than the tax increases that President Obama and Tim Kaine advocate.
Now, my audience, I want to encourage you to go to George Allen, GeorgeAllen.com, GeorgeAllen.com. Anybody who can provide support, he's going to need it because they're pouring all kinds of money into the state, including union money and so forth. That's GeorgeAllen.com. We've got to win this seat in Virginia. And let's talk about roads for a moment, because I noticed Barack Obama is actually running ads in Northern Virginia saying if Romney and Ryan are elected, all this road construction will end. You were talking about drilling offshore and how the proceeds or certain royalties will come into the state that can be used for roads.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm hired on to represent the people of Virginia in the U.S. Senate, on day one, I'm going to introduce a bill to allow us in Virginia to produce oil and gas off our coast. And then we would get 37.5% of the royalties, which would be estimated $250 million a year. I want to use those royalties for roads and transportation. And that's a way of getting more money for roads. The other thing is the federal government should stop these Depression-era Davis-Bacon wages that add about 22% of the cost of road construction when the federal government's involved. And so that's a way of getting greater efficiency and effectiveness and using our transportation dollars for roads rather than rewarding union bosses.
Now, this is very important because there would be more roads and wider roads, but for the extra high wages that have to be paid, correct?
Right, exactly. And in Northern Virginia, you've seen this with the fight over what are called project labor agreements, which discriminate against 95% of the Virginia construction workers who have decided not to join a union, but a project labor agreement is one that favors unions, and that, in fact, Virginians end up paying higher tolls and not getting the jobs that go to out-of-state contractors. And Bob McDonald and others have fought what's going on with that. And Tim Kaine's appointee, who is a union official to this group that's called the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, This one fellow is the one who is pushing that, as well as a lot of other things that really could hurt toll road users in Loudoun County and Fairfax County as well. So we really need a more effective, efficient, and I think accountable government in Washington. And that's why, Mark, I've been endorsed by the United States Chamber of Commerce, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, who represent about 6,000 small businesses in Virginia. The Fraternal Order of Police also support me because they know my record on small businesses and jobs and keeping people safe in their communities. And that matters a lot to the people in Virginia.
Oh, I'm glad to hear about the law enforcement. That's great. Now, so Tim Kaine has not called for reducing costs in building these roads, has he?
No.
In other words, the union.
He hasn't said anything like that at all.
No.
Now, his solution to everything is raise taxes, and I mean that's his record as governor. And he's.
But let me slow you down a second. If they raise taxes of the federal government, Virginia's not going to get back a percent. All these people in Loudoun County and Prince William County and Fairfax County and all these other counties, you raise taxes in Washington, the money is washed through a bureaucracy, it's washed through the transportation department, it goes in other states, other directions, like other states too, so you don't get back the money that you really need to build the roads. And what you're talking about is drilling offshore, using the funds through the same state to build the roads where 100% of that money goes to the roads in Virginia, like Northern Virginia. It's not washed through a federal bureaucracy, correct?
Yeah, that's true, and we can use it as we see fit. Virginia's a donor state, and we get about 92, maybe 93 cents back for every dollar we send to Washington, and then any Washington funds require these wages that are 22% higher than what you'd ordinarily have to pay with competitive bidding. And the other thing the federal government does is that they ought to get permitting to be much more rapid and more prompt. They ought to not be diverting highway funds for non-highway uses. And I think if we're going to Virginia, you'd get obviously more bang for your buck, as you say. 100% of it be being used and decided by Virginians, and not having to jump through the hoops and some of it being taken off and then given to other states, generally to the north of us.
GeorgeAllen.com. Can you hold on one more segment with us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
All right, I'd love it. George Allen is not only a great leader, he's a good friend of mine. I've come to know him. He's got enormous integrity. So we'll be right back. And ladies and gentlemen, every one of these Senate races, as we've talked about before, these are national races. We can't afford to lose any of them. And the race in Virginia is really, really tight. And it shouldn't be. So every one of these races is important. So I don't live in Virginia, and it doesn't matter. Every one of them matters, and I'm going to get into a whole bunch of them. George Allen versus Tim Kaine. It shouldn't even be a contest if people understand where Tim Kaine has been and what he has stood for.